So we're going to go introduce our panel, starting on the right. We're going to have each panelist introduce themselves and also say one thing that they would do differently if they could go back in their careers.
We're starting this side.
On the right.
Alan Wilson, one of the co-founders of Tripwire Interactive. What would I do? What was the question? What would I do differently?
What is one thing you would do differently about your career? Would you stay in oil?
I was going to say I'd stay in oil and banking. It's a bloody sight safer. I thought about that when you asked before, and I thought I would probably try and be a lot more intentional in what I actually did. Probably with 17, 18 years with Tripwire, we probably stumbled through most of that period, seeing what we could trip over and bump into. I'd like to think I could do it again and be, intentional.
Good. Hi everyone, I'm Annie Eaton. I am the founder and CEO of Futurist. We're a virtual reality production firm here in Atlanta. And what I would do differently, if I were to do it all over again, would be to give up control of tasks sooner. So I think as founders, maybe all of us have this problem, but wanting to hold on, this is kind of like, your baby, and you want to hold on to things, but a lot of times that ends up creating bottlenecks or limitations on what you all can achieve as a team. And so I think once I started letting go, letting other people fail, and knowing that that was okay, it has gotten a little easier to give up control, but yeah, definitely wish I had done it sooner. All right.
Hey everybody, my name is Matt Woomer, and I am the founder or co-founder of Blue Mammoth Games. The studio here in Atlanta, and the main thing we did was the fighting game Brawlhalla, which is a free-to-play fighting game sort of in the Smash Brothers genre. That was a success for us, and we started out in my basement with two of us, and we wound up being acquired by Ubisoft in 2018, and it's about a 50-person studio now, although I am now off on my own, trying to found yet another company. So we'll have lessons learned. If there was one thing that I am applying to this studio that I feel like I should have done more with Blue Mammoth, it kind of goes a little bit to Alan's point of intentionality and specifically letting projects fail faster. There are projects that we felt like we were on the cusp of and we stayed with longer than we could, and to the point that we put our company at risk too many times. And it was only through a series of lucky breaks that didn't kill us. So I'd be more mindful of that.
Hey guys, Todd Harris, currently with Resurgence. You've heard from me earlier, but was fortunate to be part of the co-founding team of High Res Studios before that. We made the game Smite, Paladins, and other games. Started with 4 of us, and we were about 450 people when I exited in 2019. And I will continue the theme, but make it even more specific, which is we should have shipped our first game sooner. Matt was on it with us. It was a great game. Best game of all time in my mind, but not in the mind of the game buying public, it turned out. So that game was Global Agenda, and we loved it. But it was a lot of time and a lot of money, and we should have shipped it sooner, and we should have put it in the hands of actual consumers sooner. We did do a good job of having people play testing it regularly in our studio, but we should have just pushed the baby out quicker.
And I'm Andrew Greenberg. My studio is Holistic Design. We've been around since the mid-90s. And my lesson builds on what Matt said, and that is to learn to pivot more quickly and more forcefully. We had a good model that stood us well for almost a decade, and then it didn't. And we did not pivot at all well, and it took us a long time to recover from that. So being ready to pivot is certainly important. All right, so we're going to go now from right to left, and we are going to go ahead and talk about that first year. From left to right, yes. We're going to pivot, go left to right. This left, this one over here, makes an L when I do that. And we're going to talk about that very first year in the business. You're all excited, it's passion, you're working with great people. And what is one obstacle for a fire alarms are always an obstacle for first-year studios, and I have a great story about that cost me 6 figures. But we'll talk about specific. What's one obstacle in the early years that you dealt with? And for us at ACI, that was reaching, being able to hire new people. We were in Atlanta in the mid-90s, not a lot of game devs here. And we thought that our existing network would handle it, and we didn't think early enough to start finding other people to ask, hey, do you know folks who want to work in games and have the skills to work in games? So for us, that first year obstacle was, how do you ramp up? How do you bring on new people effectively? Todd?
I think it was similar. We definitely were ramping up quickly. We had a pretty good model, which was a third of the people from Atlanta game development. There were not many of us back then, but we started with experienced game developers in Atlanta. Another third relocated from the West Coast that had game development experience, and the final third fresh out from universities, Georgia Tech and SCAD and others. That worked pretty well. I think the biggest obstacle was actually art. We come from doing code. Like, my background is writing code. Erez, the co-founder, was a coder. We started with coders that we trusted. So we were very solid technically. We didn't have any idea what we were doing with art at the beginning. The last games we had made were like sprites, like Adventure Doc was like programmer art. So, and we kind of failed in the early days. It took us a couple times to get a great art director on board. So I would say we hired a lot of artists. Half of them turned out amazing, and they're still very prominent today. Chuck Vincent and Dan and others. The other half, we just didn't really know what we were looking for. So we had to find people to help us hire, I guess. And specifically art was a challenge for us.
That's a good one. The obstacle of, so for everyone in this room, I think you're already making a good start obstacle-wise, because it's definitely true that when we started, I left Hi-Rez, started Blue Mammoth Games with a partner, and getting out into the world of Atlanta and finding people to work with, finding artists. We were programmers, finding artists, finding other technical people. We had a terrible, terrible, terrible time doing any kind of remote contract art, hiring someone who is not in Atlanta or not nearby to do something for us. Other people have had good experiences with that. I have never had a good experience with that, and I have tried and tried and tried. I can't even explain why it doesn't work. Maybe it's my personality type. Maybe everyone else is just pretending. I really don't know. But the only success we ever had with artists and other content developers helping us were people that we met at a Siege, that we met at a conference, that we met on a game dev meetup, that we met at a game jam and became friends with and worked with and talked about what we were doing, whether they came in-house or they just were, okay, this is somebody that I want to work with. And so that was really tough for us, getting going art-wise, again, for us because we were technical. So there's an obstacle.
Yeah, I need to get that endorsement on the Siege site. I'll just grab that clip from the video and post it on every TV show.
All right, so mine is slightly different. Money. Yeah, I was like, you guys could have taken low-hanging fruit. Did I steal yours? I'm sorry. Well, mine will be different. So my company is still very, I guess, more agency style. So we produce custom things for other companies. So unlike these wonderful studios who publish for consumers, ours is for other companies. So in starting that out, I think I and also my co-founder had other jobs. We were doing other streams of income so that we could actually, pay our bills and such. And then there was a tipping point to where we said, oh gosh, if we're really going to do this, we're going to have to flip over and do this full time. So I think for him it was about 6 months, and for me I held on about 9 months until I had to make that switch. But we aren't funded by any investors, so we had to just kind of scrape any little thing that we could find, even if it was just adjacent. Because we were working in virtual reality back in 2014, it was like, oh, consulting. All these people are interested in what it is. Let's just do these little education sessions and workshops and help people. And even though that wasn't what we wanted to be doing ultimately, because producing VR experiences was what we wanted to do, it was just finding any opportunity to get that much closer to those dreams. And so I would say, yeah, that first year, finding creative ways to get these different streams of revenue or income so that you can help that fuel what you want to be doing is like just a pill you gotta swallow and do. So yes, money and figuring out where you're gonna find it.
Now, Alan, how could yours be money if Unreal gave you $1 million?
I said it was gonna be different.
Yeah, okay. We know what I think. I remember what you're referring to. Tripwire was founded out of the 2003-04 edition of the Make Something Unreal contest. The $1 million Nvidia Make Something Unreal contest. It was $1 million worth of prizes if you count everything that they gave away to everybody at retail value. We actually walked off with 34,000 in cash. So
And the license. I thought the license was why they called it that.
We ended up with 2 licenses because what we'd actually won back in 2004 was an Unreal 2 license, which wasn't terribly helpful. So we parlayed that into, we'll do it on 2, but can we have 3? It wasn't a help. I mean, yes, the problem, we set up the company in Feb 2005 here in Roswell, Georgia, and the problem immediately was money, cash. Not helped by the fact that Epic, having given us a couple of licenses, the IRS decided that given that the retail value of those was $350,000, we owed them well over 37% of $350,000, which was rather more than we had. Anyway, Epic did a nice thing, effectively found a cunning way to avoid us having to walk into that one. We went to GDC in March of that year going, hi, somebody give us money. And I think we came away from GDC going, I swear, we're fucked. We had a moronic conversation with, I say this because they went bust, with Midway. Possibly one of the stupider conversations I've had in the
But look how big they are now.
Exactly. Yeah, look what happened to them. I still have one of their cowbells from the year they went broke. But it was cash. I mean, that first year, after GDC, we signed one of the very first deals with Valve and Steam, which basically came down to the fact that we'd heard they might be interested in doing that stuff. I think John got on the phone to them and went, hello, you interested? And they went, I think it was Jason Holtman went, oh, actually, yes, we are. And that got us the deal, but we still had 0 cash. The 34,000 lasted about 3 months, and from there it was just make shit up. We made up contracts with people that said, look, if we can't pay you until after we release the game, is that okay? And fortunately, quite a few of them went, okay. Which tells you something about developer mindset and awareness of details like paying the bills. But it was a total lack of cash. The actual ability, we could run up credit cards, and we did. We could run up banking, we could run up overdrafts. We did all of that, but still no cash. And eventually, we had to release the game and get it out the door. We got away with it.
All right. So one thing you did miraculously well, even just starting with a team of 4, was team building. Getting together the right people for the right roles, and getting things done. So let's talk about team building, for some of us who talk about that being an issue. You already talked about how hard it was to scrape by on a little bit of money. What sort of, how do you identify the people with whom you want to work, and how do you keep those relationships going? And if the relationships don't work or they don't work, how do you end those relationships? So take any part of that you want, and then we'll pass it on down the line. Yep. Yeah, start with you. We keep going back and forth.
The only slight...
I'm not going to pretend I know right and left anymore.
Okay. Well, is it their right or our left? Yeah. It's only semi-facetiously, I'm going to say, internet dating. That's how the original Red Orchestra team came together. randomly over a mob team and people bumping into each other over the internet. IRC, I think it was back in those days, or was it ICQ? Might have even been ICQ. I'm so old.
AIM.
I wish I could say that in those early years we thought carefully about it, but it was really who could we find who we didn't immediately hate, who would work for not very much money, and at least shared some of our values, even though we weren't thinking about how we expressed it. It wasn't until 10, 15 years later we thought around, how do we actually, what is Tripwire? How do we express those values? What is it we're actually looking for? But again, to my point about being intentional, we weren't that intentional enough from early on. So I think, well, Annie and Todd made a track earlier, before we started, identifying people who are not working out and dealing with that. We were very bad at it. It's hard. Someone sucks at their job and you've recruited them and you're doing all these things together in a small team. It's really hard to turn around and say, you gotta go. And that was one of the big pieces about team building that we got repeatedly wrong.
I would say with hiring our team, and I always like to say my team is all A's, no B's or C's. At least they are now. maybe not the whole time, but now all A's. Is that one of the things that we always look for is curiosity. So you don't have to be the absolute best at what you do, but as long as you are curious about problem solving and collaboration with other people, that is probably more important than technical skills to an extent. We used to have like a BS meter question that we would ask in interviews. It was actually my co-founder's idea, and we would say Kirk or Picard, but we wouldn't say Star Trek. We'd just say Kirk or Picard and see their reaction. And if they knew Star Trek, they would probably have a strong opinion, and Peter would know if they were BSing or not, or if they were trying to like guess what he wanted the answer to be. And if they had no idea what the question was, if they told us they didn't know what the question was, that was also a great sign because it meant they weren't just trying to make something up. So yeah, I would definitely advise a BS meter question because it did weed out a bunch of fakers. As far as the, like what happens when things don't work out, it can, it's just like all of us. You always probably take longer than you need to let someone go. Like, especially if you're a small team and especially if you're working on something that's creative and everyone has poured a lot of their energy and passion into. But a lot of times, once those people are identified, it starts to affect the whole team. And it's bad for morale. It's also bad for expectations. So if you have someone who's underperforming and they're getting away with it, then the other people on the team might think they can get away with it too. And then it just kind of cascades into a whole mess of a situation. So as hard as it is, and I think like I always try to communicate with people and like let them know something's going wrong so they can try to fix it, but sometimes it's beyond. If that ever gets easy for you, if any of you are founders or are planning on being founders and you don't feel bad every time that you have to let someone go, you shouldn't be running a business. Like that should always, you should feel something when you have to do that to another person. You're laughing, but it's true. I don't know how you feel. You can feel relief.
Well,
that's okay.
I'm on record as saying there's a lot of psychopaths who are very successful.
That's true. Well, yeah, but that's just not how I roll. So I think that yes, I try to feel something. Just try your best.
P-card, by the way, obviously.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of great advice here. I've been terrible at letting anyone go. It's been awful and terrible and the worst thing that's ever happened. We've gotten really lucky with Blue Mammoth, and one of the ways was everyone we got to work with, usually we knew them beforehand, and that has worked for us. I know that that's not fair to the people that we didn't know in a lot of ways. It's just so hard, and it's knowing the person beforehand and knowing, especially when you're just getting started, where you just have to have somebody who's on board with the plan. whatever it is. It's like, here's the big picture of where we're going. It comes back to the theme of how much I've struggled with contractors, because, and this gets to management style, where, I believe that there are managers who know how to say, I want this done by the end, and I want this done by then, and I want this done by then, and I come in every morning and I update the schedules and I ask people how they're doing, and that is an extremely effective management style, and everyone should do it, and I cannot, right? And I don't know why, but I cannot do that. The only way I know how to manage is, okay, here's the big plan, everybody on 3 break, and you have to have the right people for that. And ironically, having that being the only way you know how to manage means you do have to be okay at letting folks go who, like, figuring out how to let people go who are like, that's just not how I work, right? I need to know exactly what to do, and I know exactly when to do it, and I need to know exactly if this particular thing met the expectations, as opposed to the way that I work, which is looking at the art and being like, maybe it'll grow on me, and so in that way, Blue Mammoth was very much built up that way, and it was successful. But I don't know. There's definitely other ways to do it. I'm not sure exactly what to tell you.
So I guess, fundamentally we know games is talent driven, so it is all about the people. The who is more important than the what. And definitely at high res, some of you work there, we pivoted like crazy. I think we're going to talk about pivoting. We pivoted multiple times in a day, like in a playtest. So the culture was strong enough and unique enough that some people self-selected out because it just wasn't for them because of the way we made games. When it comes to team building, I think any of us that have worked on games, the team building part, I feel, is almost natural as long as you are actually shipping or driving to a milestone. Like, we are going to show at Gamescom, we are going to show at E3. Like, there's just something magic about working on a project together, and the team either comes together or you quickly fail because you just don't deliver. So I think if you're setting strong goals and you have the right people, the team building part takes care of itself. I guess looking back, I would always say we could do a better job celebrating the small wins. I think that's something that is easy to talk about, but it's hard to do when the next goal is right there. So that's something I kind of try to remind myself to do more, even with the current business. But for team building, just set aggressive goals, get the right people, and they will bond, or you'll have a new team.
I love celebrating little victories. Celebrate as often as you can, because there are a lot of things that when you're not feeling like celebrating, and somebody should. For me, when I was on the vampire game, I learned very early on that if I brought in someone who thought they were an expert on a historical era or people, they weren't, and what they would write would be no good. Whereas people who wanted to know about that era but didn't know anything would learn about it and write really interesting things and find the things that were most relevant and most evocative about that period or those people. And this became very important to us at HDI when we couldn't find talent who knew this stuff. And worse for them, they were working in our proprietary game engine, held together by Bubblegum and Twine, working on our proprietary map editors, level editors, which are horrible. And when they came in, they had to have a willingness to learn, or really, they're going to suffer anyway, but they really had to be willing to learn or it would not work out. And we picked that up. We learned that they had to want to learn. And my one tip on letting people go, it is never pleasant, it's always painful. Make sure you have all the rights you need for what you're doing. And as a partner, we had this happen. One of our partners we had to divorce with. And we had to make sure that all those rights were locked up, and even that partner's spouse's rights we had to make sure were locked up before we let go, or we would have been in a world of hurt. So make sure you have the rights. All right, let's pivot.
Hang on. So if you're talking about rights and things, having just come out of the legal session, the other thing is make sure you do it right. You don't need somebody who decides they don't like you coming after you. It's very, very time-consuming and tedious.
Get a lawyer, go all this with a lawyer as soon as you have any money to do it. And lawyers don't charge as much for some of this as you fear they do. So jump on that quickly, protect yourself. The fact that I'm still making money off of games released 30 years ago and more than 30 years ago was a testament to our lawyer, not to us. I'm not kidding. They put the stuff in our contracts and saved us. All right, now let's pivot to the pivots that you transitioned us to. Everybody has to pivot at some point, and often the pivots are the success. I mentioned before, we did not pivot. We worked on the classic publisher model. Publishers gave us an advance. We made a good game. Then we got royalties, and they made a bunch of money off of the work we'd done, and we used that royalties in the next contract, or the next game, so on and so forth. Worked for us for a number of games, and then in the 2000s, that stopped working for us, early 2000s. And where we should have been pivoting to doing more of our own stuff, we kept chasing the publisher model. Publishers collapsed on us because that was that period, and we failed to recognize our need to pivot. So how do you pivot, Todd? You pivoted several times a day. How do you know when you have to pivot, and how do you do it well?
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful to have like tailwinds because it's hard enough to make a game in the best of circumstances. So I guess, you know, we had an early, it wasn't even a pivot, it was part of the founding principles of high-res, where we just saw this transition from box to digital and Steam, which, you know, Tripwire was early on. So we got lucky or a little bit smart with that. The early days, people were calling Steam a virus. Everyone was upset that we weren't going to have a box at EB Games. You know, we ended up having like a tiny little box in Europe just so we could hand out copies. Yeah, I have it too, and honestly, I love it. Like, I'm old school. Like, I like the boxes, but it was clear that's not where the audience was going. So we were early on digital distribution, early on free-to-play, which was also controversial. So those were, and not originally what we were doing. Like, our first game was buy-to-play, and we pivoted to free-to-play, and then we decided to stick with that. So, yeah, I mean, I guess our industry is always on the cutting edge of technology, and I think you just have to look at what is next. And if you make a good game and you have those tailwinds, you have a chance. Our biggest pivot risk was when we had made Global Agenda and we started prototyping a tower defense mode inside Global Agenda, even though it had 1,000 modes already. It was a very ambitious, overscoped title. And it was really fun, and we could have shipped it like in a week and had a really fun tower defense game, but we saw League of Legends and we're like, oh wait, they only have one mode and one map? Why are we working so hard? Why don't we just make it its own game? And that would have been a science fiction themed MOBA. And I give credit to Erez, you know, CEO, because rather than doing the relative easy, inexpensive task of shipping that, we said, we feel so strong, we're going to go all in, we're going to make all new art around this mythology theme, call it Smite. I mean, that was an extra 2 years and many millions of dollars out of his pocket. And, you know, it was a risk that paid off, right? So that was one of 100 pivots that we did. Some were good and some were not, but yeah. You have to look at what's out there, and our industry is a game of swings, and that swing happened to work.
Pivoting, man, it is so hard. It is so hard, and all of you know this, but it is so hard to know the difference between being agile and pivoting and being wishy-washy and not being persistent and seeing your ideas through. And it is, and I don't know the magic answer, but if I had to pick one thing, it would be getting a product out in front of players. That finding ways to get products out in front of players quickly is going to help you so much with knowing when to pivot and when you're just like, I swear we just had this conversation 2 weeks ago and now we're revisiting it. What are you talking about, right? Because with player feedback, you genuinely have new information. You could just figure out how to get them to play the game and give us a little money, we were going to be fine. And we could not do it. We could not convince our players to put money in. You know, hey, would you like to play the game and have a horse to ride around on? And hey, would you like to play the game and have these weapon upgrades? Blah, 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 blah. We couldn't figure it out. And so Brawlhalla began as a PvP mode to this game, to this Dungeon Blitz game. And then it kind of gets to what Todd was talking about, where it's like, okay, what is the point at which you look at that and say, just cut the Dungeon Blitz part away?
Which you spent years doing.
Which we had spent years and years, and love and content, and we had players and we had all this stuff. and that this is not that. This is a different game. And one of the big things was we sat down and said, all right, well, if we build Brawlhalla from the start as a fighting game that's not PvP Dungeon Blitz, we just freed up a lot. And second of all, we can start with the monetization in mind. We can look at the monetization models out there and pick one instead of trying to retrofit our game. So that was sort of the logic behind the pivot. And so then we took that and we basically saw League of Legends and said, okay, that one. And so then we looked, and then we took that to PAX, and there's one of the very original Brawlhalla players right there, F. Dot, and we, and got the good feedback. But even then, really early on, getting that player feedback is as an agreed hub, as a spot that you want to pivot on, that can help a lot. And also not getting to the playable thing. One secret, I know I'm going on and on, but whatever. One secret thing that will be happening in your studio if you don't have your game in front of players is that you think that you all agree on what game you're playing and you don't. And until you get it in front of players and are forced to say it's this, not that, if you have 10 people, you have 10 different ideas of what is going out the door. And so that can really help, again, give you a spot to decide, okay, now we've gotten to here, where to go next.
Woo. No, that was great. I'm like, dang, how am I gonna follow that? So again, my business is a little bit different, but we have pivoted, and one of our pivots, around 2020, was creating a real game, not just these produced things for other people. I learned in this pivot that it is really hard to manage yourself, so mad respect to all of you, because the beauty of working with clients is that they ultimately can be like, no, don't do that, yes, do that, which is very helpful in guiding us to execute. But when we have the freedom to do whatever we want, man, did we get in trouble. So the way this all happened was kind of 2014 to 2019. We just did, as I said earlier, any project we could get our hands on. We did VR, we did AR, we did all sorts of things. We did projects for the Super Bowl and for hospitals, and just all over the place. And then Meta approached us in late 2019 and said, hey, we're trying to invest in more, well, not really invest, like you said, with resources, not money, in companies that are women-led production studios for VR, which there aren't that many. And so, heck yeah, I'm gonna take your stuff, Meta. And so they gave us a bunch of hardware, they gave us development support, engineering resources, and some early access stuff. So it was actually very exciting because it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. February 2020 was when we started officially working with them, and we didn't really know what was gonna happen. But then a bunch of our client projects got canceled, we had some extra funds, and we're like, let's just do this, let's just try it. And yeah, that's where we got into trouble, was self-managing our own creative baby. We did eventually get it published. It's in early access. It's been in early access for 3 years. We kind of had to stop touching it because we got client projects and we needed money, and we ended up making it paid at first, and then we dropped it down to free, and it's just remained free, and it's got thousands of players, which is really exciting for a VR game especially. But I think the lesson there, aside from managing our own selves, was that we bit off way more than we could chew. We didn't start with something that was small. We started with an open world gardening simulation game, which, yeah, Animal Crossing was a little bit of an influence there. We were all playing it then. But we wanted to do it in VR. So I think creating something that was inspirational and exciting and still, I think, fun, we probably should have scaled back quite a bit to make something that was more realistic in what we could accomplish with a small team and no money. We then, after that period, settled strictly into immersive training, and that has been amazing. It's serious games, gamified learning experiences, and that has been the best path we could have taken. I would call it a pivot. Now that we've settled into it, I feel like, I'm not gonna say I settled, but it is nice to be settled for a minute. And we make things for Walmart and Delta and Mars, great companies. So it is fun, but I got that founder itch recently, and So last year we decided to pivot once again and create our own training content library that we're licensing to try and create recurring revenue. And we've been able to sell some licenses. So my latest pivot, it has a business goal behind it. It's not just something we wanted to do, it's something that we felt would provide more underlying stability for the business. So, I mean, we're pivoting all the time. I don't think you can get away from it because you get that, like, after a couple years of doing the same thing, you just start to shake a little bit. You gotta do something.
Okay, I think mine is mostly ditto. What Matt said, you get started down a project, and especially as the company gets bigger and bigger, I talk about development blindness. You know what you're building, you're all focused on it, you're all heading in the same direction, and you know it's great because we've played it ourselves. You know, we have compulsory playtests, mandatory playtests once a week, and it's great. Get it in front of other people sooner than you dare. Yeah, sure, sign up to NDAs and not your friends. Because the number of rabbit holes I've seen us go down over the years is very terrifying. And backing out of them, especially once the team is getting bigger and bigger, when you've got 100 plus people working on something, trying to back out of a rabbit hole is very painful and very expensive. And you know you should pivot, you know you should change something, but you don't want to, so let's just make this, if we throw more money down this rabbit hole, it'll work. Don't do it. Get that stuff out to unbiased opinion, preferably people who don't even like you, because they'll give you an honest opinion. And listen. It's going to be very, very painful sometimes. We've seen it enough times with the Red Orchestra franchise, with the Killing Floor franchise, and with Vietnam, we ended up doing a beta program from very, very early on, because we had to have that bite back from the people who are going to pay the money for the game. If you just rely on yourselves, you're so far down your own rabbit hole, so far up your own arsehole, that you don't see it.
All right, we have time for at least one question. First hand up gets the option. Here we go.
Hi. So, during the first question, you talked a lot about the challenges of the early market here in Atlanta. In the 90s and 2000s, both the financial market and the talent market. Safe to say that the market here in this city has changed a lot over the course of time, especially in the last couple of years. So what are the main challenges you see in the market right now when it comes to running these studios?
I'll say the main opportunity is the tax credits. Spend $250,000 on your payroll, get the tax credits. Same as the film credit. All right, sorry, go ahead.
You have to have some money to spend to do
Yeah,
that.
that is true.
Made $1 million from Unity, from Unreal.
I mean, it's very challenging, right? Just keeping it real, right? There's been 40,000 layoffs in the last 4 years. So if you're new and trying to break in, you're competing with a bunch of experienced talent. So it's tough, you know. And I also think gaming is changing with consumer preferences. So it's hard. It's harder than it was when we started Hi-Res. Yeah, I mean, I will not make it a total sales pitch for what we're doing with Ghost Launchpad, but I will say the reason I am founding another thing that is involved with developing games is I just see a unique opportunity. It may work, it may not work, but I see that things are really changing and we're approaching it a very different way. And so people can come and talk with me about it, but the short pitch is there's door one into game development, which is you get a job for a AAA company. It's really hard. Or there's door two, which is you do an indie game and try to self-publish on Steam, which I would say is even harder, honestly. I mean, you can do it, and it might be passion, but I would say for financial sustainability, it's even harder. So we're trying to do a door number 3, which is you're a little bit of an indie, but you're going alongside with others, and that's what we're building, and talk with me about it after, because I don't want to take all the time. But the macro environment is it's challenging. So Georgia has great talent. Georgia does have a tax credit, so if you are able to somehow cobble together something, the way the tax credit is structured, it doesn't really help an EA-sized company. It was helpful for our companies in the early days, and so that's helpful, but it's challenging, and we're trying to chart a new path.
Let me just throw a thought out there, which is, you just mentioned Steam, and you can throw a game out on Steam. Yeah, it doesn't cost much to throw out a game out on Steam. I haven't looked in over a year. I haven't run the numbers in over a year. Last time I looked, which was about the spring of last year, does anyone know what the average number of units a game sells on Steam is? Last time I looked, about 3,500. 3,500 units is the average. Somebody stop and run the math. You've got to be very, very good. You've got to find a way. Much as I would love to encourage people to sit in the basement, in the garage, and spin out a game, you've got to have something. And it's got to be better than the average. 3,500 units at $10 a pop. It's not going to go very far.
I want to say the opposite of what Alan said, which is he is absolutely right about everything he said, and you absolutely have to kick ass, and indie game development is extremely risky, and the odds are against you. On the other hand, we just had an entire talk where we didn't say the word AI, so I just want to talk about it for a second. Which is, I know nobody wanted to,
it's because we're all old.
We're in this really interesting spot, and it's scary, and it's scary for young developers, and it's and we're kind of old fogies in a lot of ways. We don't necessarily know what to tell you. Annie probably does, but the rest of us don't. What to tell you about this, except that there are definitely two sides of the coin in terms of when you're at the when you're at the founder level with just a couple of people, just how much you can do the basics of things that required a lot more specialized knowledge now than you could when we started, before that, both in terms of product, but also you can just be like, I need to get a server going. How do I get this server going? Just stuff that used to take months, you can just get going. And so there is a lot of room for an indie person to say, here is what I'm really good at. Let me do that, and let me find ways to just do whatever the engine does out of the box for all the other stuff, to just ask ChatGPT how to roll me up a server for other stuff. And there's a real opportunity there, I think. So there's a lot going on. I think it's a good time to be an indie, although, dang, it's hard.
I would also say, yeah, let AI do the administrative things you don't want to do. But when it comes to having a game published, like self-published on Steam or whatever, yeah, maybe you're not going to make a lot of money, but I do think as employers, it shows us that you can actually execute something and you are motivated and driven. So I want to say, and I know this is small probably compared to y'all, but just random resumes for devs that have come in through our contact form on our website over the past 6 months. I have like 85 qualified VR developers, which is crazy because that's a lot. That's a lot for me. So any of them that I see that have published something that they can take ownership of shows me that they know how to execute. Something that we've had a lot of trouble with, hiring people who are idea people, we don't know them, some of us are them, or people who have been members of a team but maybe they're kind of hiding in the shadows, or people who can talk the talk and have beautiful resumes but haven't shown the ability to execute. I think especially as a small business owner, seeing someone who can execute and has proven that will take you farther. So yeah, maybe you're not going to make a lot of money, but if you have a passion project, put it out there. You never know, and then it'll show you can execute.
Yeah, there is a corollary to the downloads. We've referred a little to the state of the industry, and you look at the investment that's been going in over the last few years. It's plummeted. I think it's safe to say, which means that. And if you look at the player stats, players have retrenched to games they know and love. And one of the things that's missing right now, and I would, if I was investing, which I'm not, put a prediction on, is that there's going to be a real dearth of good, innovative material over the next 2 or 3 years, because everyone's been retrenching so hard. Everyone's afraid to spend money on new things. You've got sequels, Killing Floor 3. People are happy to invest because it's safer. But I think there is going to be a space in the next couple of years where that changes.
Yeah, that's an optimistic note to me. I mean, I think you're right. But you're right. I mean, the big companies are doubling down on franchises and not taking risks, and there will be winners. There will be big new winners. So.
And I will say, perhaps to end it, focus as much on building that great game, but also focus on building that great community. I'm very happy the Man for the Fading Suns game from 30 years ago has just gotten 1,000 people in its Discord. It's sold over 100,000 units over the years, but I'm all about that 1,000 people talking nonstop in my Discord, even if half the time they're complaining about the AI. Bring up AI again. But in all seriousness, it is that community that matters. I just started a new Discord server for my Machiavelli the Prince game, and already people are in there talking, and I'm excited. The game's not even out on Steam yet, no demo out yet, but it is that community that's going to carry you through. That's definitely the community that's carrying our games and continue to mean that every quarter I'm selling the same number of these games and more of some of them. And that community providing great games of value to that community, to a good community, is probably the best part of this job, being part of that community. So with that, let me thank all of our founders on this panel. Thanks to all of you, and thanks to Todd for this eSports Summit that's rocked so well today. And get ready for the party that Todd and Jesslyn are throwing this evening. Don't tell Randy about it. Randy's not invited.
Yeah, a brief housekeeping, because there's a lot going on. There is another set of panels here and in there, and then at 4:45, grab a friend and head upstairs, and the programming will continue upstairs at 4:45. The next panel will be 5 p.m. So we'll be shifting from down here to up there at 5 p.m. We'll spend about an hour and a half up there, and then we'll come down here and have some food and drink and merriment. So thanks for being here.
Yay!